We come across and also interact with people living with disabilities on our daily life runnings, starting from on the streets, in the vehicles, public transport, in supermarkets, in churches, and eventually in our workplaces. I just wonder how much of the right information we have when it comes to interacting with these people who live with disabilities, who, like I said earlier, could be our family members, our colleagues, our neighbors, or just our fellow citizens.
My name is Susan Mutenyo. I work in Budalangi, Busia County, and that's where I live. And for over a period of time, I've been working with the orphans and vulnerable children within the community.
Okay, my name is Sophie Wachie. I am a student and I currently live in Eldoret.
My name is Daisy Ongete. I stay in Nairobi and I work in Kenyatta National Hospital.
There is some level of awareness that is so segregated among the groups within the community. For example, among the medical personnel, there is some level of awareness by nature of their training, so they do understand and can give services. However, the services are limited depending on the health facility that one is working with, the effectiveness of the facility to deliver the kind of services. If I would want to look at the education sector, yes, we have special schools within, or the special units within the existing schools that caters for the children with disabilities, and we even have schools specifically for a certain kind of a disability. For example, the visual impairment. Actually, it's not easy to have them in the normal schools because of the nature of their curriculum and their assistive devices. Within religious places and the other social places within the communities, there is limited access to services for the persons with disabilities. Most buildings are not disability friendly, or for example, in a church, we may not be having someone who can do translation to sign language. So persons with such a kind of disability like hearing would miss it out in such gatherings. The communities we live in, people have poor resources, or they live at less than $1 per day. So they are not, for as much as we are able to identify the disability, the mitigation is not properly done. We are not able to get the assistive devices. For the children, to be specific, because I work with them, children with disabilities tend to be neglected because they can't cope with the other children within the community, so they miss out on their rights to play, the right to be children, just to interact with others. They delay attending school because they have got to be older enough to be able to catch up with the emerging situations within the community. So there is need to have a sensitization, and besides sensitization, there is also need just to have resources allocated for assistive devices to mitigate the ones who are having the disabilities and have been identified.
I interact with people who have disabilities. I interact with people who have relatives and friends and loved ones who are disabled. But I would say that generally, the people I interact with are not very knowledgeable when it comes to disabilities. There's a lot of misconception and misinformation when it comes to disabilities in the society, in terms of how they perceive them, how they treat them, and just the general perception around disability.
Our Kenyan society is not aware enough of people living with disability because you find most of the time our traditions treat people living with disabilities as an outcast, and you'll find most of the time they tend to hide them in their homes so that they don't get exposed to the society because of the fear of how the society will perceive those people living with disabilities. I'd suggest that the Kenyan government employs people living with disabilities and provide things like braille, sign language interpreters in working institutions so that they can easily access the government services easily.
I come across a number of disabilities. One that is so outspoken is the physical disability, that you'll see someone either without a limb or a leg, which is brought about either by congenital malformation, or for the children I work with, probably they missed out on immunization, especially the polio vaccine. The other kind of disability I see is the hearing impairment, which is not easy to tell, but with a closer look, you are able to tell that this child or this person is not able to hear. The other kind of disability is the visual impairment, where we will meet someone walking with a white stick, or for those who cannot afford it, they will still be moving around with the aid of someone, especially a family member. And what is disappointing about this is that you will find there the children aiding their parents or their grandparents, and it makes them miss out on their rights.
Some of the common disabilities that I encounter at work are people living with visual impairment, hearing impairment, and some people who are unable to walk, they have to use crutches, wheelchairs, so that they can be able to move.
Yeah, for quite some time, we've been supporting the persons living with disabilities at handout level for food donations, cloth donations, but seemingly that is not sustainable, since when we do it in such kind of blocks, we are not able to see the desired results. For example, if they were children, they will not be able to collect enough to support their schooling or their medical care, or even just having the assistive devices in place. Besides what the government is doing, and it's a good initiative where we have the persons living with disabilities enrolled to a national program and getting support from the government, we would also have the assistive devices enough to cater for the persons living with disabilities in institutions such as the schools. Within the medical setup, we could have enough, or just enough, to support persons who come to seek for maybe orthopedic support within the hospitals, and have the required assistive devices that have to be prescribed by a medical practitioner.
I always thought that disabled people would want to be helped out physically, specifically in terms of handouts. Like if you encounter, let's say, a visually impaired person or someone who is disabled in their limbs, not able to move, I always thought that the only solution or the only help you can give that touches their hearts is some physical help. Give them maybe some money, give them maybe a little food. I mean, material help. That's what I thought. But eventually I'm realizing some of them are very sufficient without those handouts, without that material help. I think there is more, or they would love more than those physical handouts that I give them or we give them.